Dun, 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 dun. Oh, wait, that's Dragon Quest. Hey, y'all, it's me, Majora. As many of you know, I love Dragon Quest. Not everyone knows that, but I'm a big fan of that series. But what about Final Fantasies? Well, to set the record straight, I just beat my first Final Fantasy. Hooray! Yay, I did it. My first Final Fantasy. A bit of an oxymoron, no? Well, I just did about 2 hours worth of podcast on it over on the Button Mappers. But before I get to that, let me just make you guess for a second. Which one was it? Was it Final Fantasy 1, the OG? Was it the follow-up sequel? Could it follow up in its footsteps? No? Maybe? I'm not sure because I haven't played it. Well, the Final Fantasy that I played and beat sometime last week was Final Fantasy 7. Yeah, the classic. People always talk about Final Fantasy 7. It got the remake this year. Was it this year or was it last year? I'm not really sure. I haven't played it. But I played the original for the PlayStation 1 on my Nintendo Switch. Ah, yes, my Nintendo Switch. Actually, if I'm going to recommend playing one of the Final Fantasies between 7 and 9, I will 100% say play it on Switch. This one was so good for playing on the Switch because if you push in on the left control stick, it actually triples the speed of a lot of the combat. And I found the game so tediously slow at points it really didn't need to be. That's kind of the point of today's video, is to just give you like a gaming vlog about my experience with it. If you want like a real in-depth discussion on it, I highly suggest you check out the map out videos on disc 1 and disc 2 and 3 that Alex Spencer and I did over on the Button Mappers. I'll have a card in the top right corner. It was a lot of banter, it was a lot of fun, but it was also to the point, to the nitty gritty, to that gong-ga-ga. All about that Midgar. But you know what? I want to speak generally about it today. Final Fantasy VII. So it's not the first time I tried playing it. I actually owned it on the PS4, and I still own it on PS4. But I kind of just stopped like after Midgar. I got like a little lost with the overworld. And I think just the motivation to map out the game made me a lot more interested in seeing it through to the finale. I don't really care so much about there being a remake, but it was a big commitment. It's actually a big accomplishment for me because the last turn-based RPG that I played on console was Persona 5, and that was like 2 or 3 years ago. And I remember spending like 3 months on that game. This game actually felt kind of close, to be honest, a little scarily so. But I bought it on Nintendo Switch because I knew that would be the way that I would see it through to the end. I want to speak generally about it as a turn-based RPG. Final Fantasy is like weird in that it's not strictly turn-based because even though you do select character prompts, there's a limit gauge and you have to wait for the gauge to fill up before you can select an attack. So it simulates this sense of being real time, but it's not really. I think sometimes even if you just don't select an action, the opposing character won't even do any commands. I didn't mind that system. That system was fine. I think my thing about Final Fantasy VII was that while it is relatively easy to understand the mechanics, there's a lot of like hidden depth to it, to understanding a lot of the systems that are there. And I think like the first time that you play it, if you don't really know what you're walking into, it can be complicated. I didn't understand materia for shit. I didn't understand you had to get materia to get a chocobo, or you had to put materia on a character in order to get a chocobo. And so some of those things were like kind of confusing to me. A lot of things are just not clear in the game. And, you know, Spencer and I and Alex really went into that, like why some things should have been clearer but weren't always. And so that was a hurdle for me. I had to keep looking back and forth at a video walkthrough and the game. You know, I put the phone down and then I have to look again. Where am I supposed to go? The map was confusing. The game just has not aged well. I understand why there's a remake and why there was so much clamor for it. It was well deserved. I don't know anything about the remake, but I think for a first-time player, that remake might be where it's at. However, after having finished Final Fantasy VII, I have to say I would rather play it over than play a strictly action RPG version of it. I think there's a lot of rewarding things to it now, like especially coming into it post play. I think that first playthrough is like really a hurdle, um, but it's rewarding in the end when you can kind of customize your characters and you see what characters are out there, and the fact that there are kind of these optional characters really spruces up what you can do in Final Fantasy VII. So I respect it for that. With that being said, there's a lot of slog points. There's a lot of points where it really feels slow, and they tried doing a lot. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail on it, but let's just say it has some of the things in that game have not aged well. But the story is not one of them. I thought the story was unique and interesting, although very hard to follow at points. I like the idea. I like the settings and everything. I just wish I understood it a little better. I had to like piece it together at several points, and Alex was even saying maybe some of that stuff was lost in translation. But for a first Final Fantasy to beat, it was well worth it. I've actually started a few other Final Fantasy games before, but have had to put them down, either out of boredom or memory loss on my console. So that sucked. But this was not the case. I really enjoyed it. I own Final Fantasy IX on Switch, and I might get 8 too. We'll see. I got to think about it. But that was my experience with my quote-unquote first Final Fantasy, the first one I beat anyway. I hope that gave you some insight into like why it's the first one, like what I thought of it, etc. Maybe I didn't tell you why it's the first one. I've always kind of been shy from like these kind of like very strictly Japanese feeling turn-based RPGs, and I think Final Fantasy falls under that category. But I don't think it felt too anime. I liked some of like the cutscenes and such. Even if some of the overworld and even midworld traversal was complex. But that's my experience. What's yours? Have you played a Final Fantasy game? What was your first and what was it like? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the gaming vlog. Stay tuned and subscribe for more great gaming content. I'll catch y'all later. Peace out, Majora T from Majora T.